The gentle hum of the cafe was a familiar soundtrack to Clara's evenings, but tonight it was drowned out by the low, worried voice of the little girl across from her. Emma, just 7 years old, her small hands wrapped around a cold cup of hot chocolate she hadn't touched, looked up at her mother with eyes far too old for her face. "Mommy?" she whispered, the sound almost lost in the cozy noise of the place. "What if the miracle doesn't come?" Clara's heart, already heavy as a stone, cracked a little more. She reached across the table, covering her daughter's hands with her own, which were chilled despite the warm room. She forced a smile, one that didn't reach her tired eyes. "We just have to have a little more faith, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Remember what we're doing? We're just waiting for a miracle." She said it like a mantra, a prayer she was desperately trying to believe herself. Their life hadn't always been this fragile. Just 6 months ago, their small apartment was filled with laughter and the comfortable clutter of a happy family. Clara worked as a receptionist at a dental office, and her husband, David, was a manager at a local hardware store. It was a modest life, but it was theirs, woven together with love and security. Then the unthinkable, a sudden, aggressive illness took David with a swiftness that left them both gasping for air. The medical bills that followed were a tidal wave, swallowing their savings, then their security, and finally their home. The eviction notice was the final cold stamp on their reality. For the last 2 nights, they'd slept in their old sedan, parked in different corners of the city, trying to be invisible. Tonight, the biting cold had driven them into this cafe, where Clara had spent her last few dollars on that single hot chocolate for Emma and a glass of water for herself. They weren't customers, they were refugees seeking warmth. Clara watched her daughter. Emma had taken to drawing on napkins with a tiny pencil stub she kept in her pocket. She was sketching their old apartment, the one with the blue front door. Every line was a silent plea for a past that was gone. A well-dressed couple at the next table glanced over, their eyes lingering on Clara's worn coat and Emma's slightly too small shoes. Clara felt the heat of shame creep up her neck. She wanted to explain, to tell them she was a good mother, that she was trying, that they weren't begging, they were just waiting. But the words stuck in her throat. The barista, a young man with a kind face, had already refilled her water glass twice without being asked. It was a small kindness, but it felt like a spotlight on their need. Clara kept her eyes fixed on the condensation on her glass, the conflict inside her, a raging storm. Pride told her to leave, to spare her daughter this quiet humiliation, but necessity and a mother's fierce love kept her rooted to the seat. The warmth was keeping the chill from Emma's bones. "Excuse me." The voice was gentle, hesitant. Clara looked up, expecting the barista or perhaps the manager to finally ask them to leave. Instead, it was an elderly woman standing by their table. She had soft gray hair, warm brown eyes, and a smile that seemed to hold a universe of calm. In her hands, she carried a tray with 2 steaming bowls of soup, a grilled cheese sandwich, and 2 slices of cake. "I couldn't help but overhear," the woman said, her voice like worn velvet. "My name is Eleanor. Would it be all right if I joined you? I hate eating alone." Clara was speechless. This was not what she had expected. She glanced at Emma, who was looking at the grilled cheese with wide, hopeful eyes. We don't," Clara stammered, her pride making a final, feeble stand. We can't." Eleanor's smile deepened. "You can," she said, simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. "Consider it a favor to me. It's terribly lonely over there by the window." Without waiting for further protest, she carefully set the tray down and slid into the booth beside Emma, placing the soup and sandwich in front of the girl. "That looks like a wonderful drawing," she said to Emma, pointing to the napkin. The twist, the realization, didn't come in a thunderclap. It came in the quiet, ordinary moments that followed, as Emma, after a shy nod from Clara, began to eat with a hunger she'd been trying to hide. Eleanor began to talk. She didn't ask prying questions. She simply shared stories. She spoke of her late husband, Frank, a carpenter who could fix anything. She spoke of her son living overseas and how she missed the noise of a family in her quiet house. Her words weren't filled with pity, but with a profound understanding that felt like a balm. Then, as Emma finished her sandwich, Eleanor turned her kind gaze to Clara. "You know, dear, many years ago, Frank and I were in a spot of trouble, not much unlike this, actually. We had a little one, and the world felt very cold." Clara listened, tears she'd been holding back beginning to well up. Eleanor continued, "We were sitting in a diner, out of options, feeling utterly lost, and a stranger, a man in a flour-dusted apron, a baker, it turned out, sat down with us. He bought us a meal. Then he offered Frank a job, just like that." She paused, sipping her tea. "That man didn't just give us a meal, dear. He gave us our future back. He was our miracle." Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a small, plain business card, placing it on the table and sliding it towards Clara. It had only a name, Eleanor Finch, a phone number, and an address. "That bakery," Eleanor said, her eyes holding Clara's with an intensity that spoke of shared history, "that became ours. Frank and I ran it for 35 happy years. We sold it last year when my arthritis got too bad. The new owners are lovely, but they've been desperate for reliable, kind-hearted help. The receptionist position has been open for weeks." The world seemed to tilt and then right itself on a new, impossible axis. Clara looked from the card to Eleanor's face, searching for a joke, a trick. She found only sincere, unwavering kindness. "The apartment above the bakery," Eleanor added, as if reading the next question in Clara's heart. "It's small, but it's clean, warm, and it's been empty. It needs a family's laughter in it again." This was no random act of charity. This was a thread, connecting one moment of desperation to another across decades. The stranger who had sat down wasn't just a kind woman. She was a living testament that miracles did happen, and sometimes they paid their blessings forward. The resolution unfolded with a gentle grace. Eleanor insisted on driving them that very night to see the bakery. It was a charming little brick building with a blue awning, and the apartment above was indeed small, but it was filled with light and warmth. The new owners, a young couple, greeted them not with suspicion, but with relief and immediate warmth, especially when they saw Emma. Within days, Clara had started her new job. The work was familiar and comforting. Emma started at a new school, and in the evenings they would bake together in the quiet kitchen below, the smell of bread and cinnamon filling their new home. They weren't just surviving, they were living again. Eleanor became a regular visitor, a surrogate grandmother whose presence was a gentle, guiding light. One afternoon, as they shared tea in the bakery, Clara finally found the words. "Eleanor," she asked, her voice thick with emotion, "why us? That night in the cafe, you could have helped anyone." Eleanor patted her hand, her eyes twinkling. "My dear," she said softly, "I didn't just see a mother and daughter having a hard time. I heard a mother teaching her daughter the most important lesson of all, to keep faith. When I heard your little girl ask about the miracle, and I heard your answer, I heard my own voice from long ago. I was just returning what was once so freely given to me." The story ends not with a grand celebration, but with a quiet evening in their apartment. Clara is tucking Emma into bed in her own room under a warm blanket. The drawing of the old apartment with the blue door is now pinned to a corkboard next to a new drawing, a bakery with a blue awning. "Mommy," Emma whispers sleepily, "the miracle came, didn't it?" Clara leans down and kisses her forehead. "Yes, my love, it did, and it had a kind smile and a bowl of soup."
Sometimes a miracle doesn't arrive with fanfare. It simply walks into a cafe, sees a heart holding on to hope, and quietly takes a seat. It reminds us that the greatest forces in this world are not money or power, but empathy, memory, and the courage to pass a kindness on.